Thanks again for Pocket Labs, for you guys, Dave and Clifton especially, for putting all this energy into this event. And Matt and I are delighted to be with you guys here today. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to give you a presentation. I also wanted to mention that our program or anything, you can send them through the chat. Deanna might respond or she might send them to us. Anyhow, we're excited to be here. We are a middle school science program, but I think everything we're going to tell you today could be for middle school, but it could be for elementary or high school as well. And we're going to be talking about a project-based approach that we use at Green Ninja. So we're going to start, just do a quick introduction, and then we're going to jump into our program and give you some concrete examples that we think you can do with your students in a remote environment, which is what we're in today. And we think that this, combined with NGSS thinking, can be really helpful, and we hope to promote that today. So this is me. I'm Eugene. I'm a professor. I do have a PhD, so I'm a doctor, but I'm also known as Dr. Burrito. And I'm going to share with you how that happened, and it's relevant to what we're talking about today. You know, I'm a professor at San Jose State. All the campuses are closed right now, but it's a nice campus. You get a chance to visit someday. I'm a climate scientist, so I study global average temperature, and I studied that for many years. And I became interested in, obviously, climate change and the impact it's having on our planet, but also how we're not really doing anything about it. So I tried to do something about it by writing a book. And so I wrote this book about food and climate change. And it convinced me that education and communication are important tools in responding to. So about a decade ago, we invented this climate action superhero and character called Green Ninja. And Green Ninja was manifested in films, in games, and educational experiences. And the goal was to provide educators with short videos or content that they could use to inspire students to create a cleaner and healthier planet for everyone. We have about 50 films that anyone can access, and we'll talk about those a little bit more later. But there are some films in there that are about burritos. And here I am as Dr. Burrito, interrogating the carbon footprint of 2 different types of burritos. You know, this is an example of one of these short films that we make that a teacher could use to foreground some content to relate to science. Now, today is also a special day. In addition to this Science is Cool conference, I wonder how many people know that today is National Burrito Day, April 2nd. Maybe you don't get too much out of this conference. I'm sure you're going to get a lot of cool stuff. But Chipotle, I believe, is giving out 1,000 burritos, or no, it's 100,000 burritos to healthcare workers around the country for free, in celebration for the heroic work that they're doing. But I also believe that if you go into some of your local favorite taquerias who are celebrating Burrito Day, you might get a discount. And I mean, we know we got to support our people that are on the front lines today. So anyhow, I wanted to tell you that it was National Burrito Day. Now, it's kind of silly, this thing about burritos, but we've actually been doing some academic research around student motivation and the impact that education can have on behavior. And Deanna in the chat can share with you, we just had a paper come out in a journal a couple months ago that I think is pretty interesting to document the impact that education can have on long-term behavior. So that's my quick spiel on to Matt, who's going to tell you a little bit about himself.
Hi, everybody. We'll see how our internet connection is holding up here in my house, but I teach at Cal State Northridge, but I claim to have this view of science education kind of from the bottom all the way up to the top. I was a stay-at-home dad. I've been a high school teacher. I've teach at Cal State Northridge, and I've worked as a research scientist at the U.S. Geological Survey. And I kind of think that all those things together, that resume was one of the things that helped me work my way towards helping California as it's been adopting the next generation science standards. I was the lead writer for California's Framework for Science, which is California's way of implementing the NGSS. And as I was reflecting on things, I think this is my 21st year as doing curriculum development and professional development with teachers. So I'm happy to be here and so amazed at how many of you are taking time here to participate in this Unconference. So let's get started. You want to advance us, Eugene, there?
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to tell you sort of from the perspective of California. When we wrote our framework, we adopted the next generation science standards, but we did things, we wanted to emphasize not just the three-dimensional aspect of the NGSS, but there's two other key instructional shifts that we really wanted to emphasize. And one of those was, of course, that NGSS is coherent across the curriculum, both horizontally, meaning we have those connections to other disciplines from the English language arts and the math and the social studies. We really want to make sure that we're making those connections. And of course, NGSS and it's spiraling upwards as we hit topics over and over. But the biggest thing that California has stamped onto things is this idea that we really want to make sure that science instruction is relevant to our local communities and to our students' interests and trying to meet their needs. And you can see that happening in spades right now as everybody has, of course, changed what our local community looks like completely. But this idea of really trying to make sure that we are local and relevant. Even hyper-local, we like to call it, where we're really having students drill into local environmental challenges that are happening right in their community and their backyard. And that's going to come up as we talk about how this is going to adapt to things. So our next slide here. Of course, many of you are familiar with NGSS and its three dimensions. We talk about what scientists do. That's the science and engineering practices. The background knowledge that we bring to bear, what we know, those are our disciplinary core ideas over on the right side of this logo. And at the bottom of the logo are these cross-cutting concepts, things that cut across all of science, the way scientists think about things, scientists and engineers. And the little diagram that's classically shown on the right side here is this braiding together of these ideas that these three dimensions have to work together or we don't really succeed in actually understanding science, solving problems in engineering. The last thing that you may or may not know about, a lot of people in California, including myself when I was a high school teacher, didn't know about, is we've actually have a mandate by law from our legislature to teach principles and concepts in California. And that means that to really be tackling, again, these local environmental problems, and there's a variety of principles that the state has up for us. World where understand these things become relevant, and that's part of where Green Ninja got its birthing from. And I think that's what we're going to talk about next. Eugene, you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So we developed our curriculum over the last 5 years with NGSS completely in mind. We had an expert team of developers and reviewers, including Matt, who really helped guide our development. But we learned most from teachers, and we love working closely with teachers to create stuff, to iterate, and to have it evolve. And so our approach, it really uses a project-based approach, and that's what we want to offer folks to think about here today. So I'm just going to show you the architecture of every unit of instruction in Green Ninja. And today you'll have an option at the end. We'll provide you with details about how you can get access to our curriculum or even just use pieces of it. And we're happy for people throughout this academic year to use our materials for free and to check it out. And maybe you find this approach to be helpful. But every unit in Green Ninja starts with a challenge, with a unit challenge. And a unit's about 30 days of instruction. And there's going to be phenomenon-based lessons and investigations, hands-on activities like we'd expect to see in a good science program, students making sense of the world. But what's unique about our program is that at the end, students are going to get a chance to do something about this unit challenge in a culminating experience or culminating project. And we're going to show you what those culminating projects look like, and you'll be able to potentially apply them in your own teaching. And we think that it really works well in a kind of home environment like we're operating in today. There's another perspective, and that is the student journey that we can think about. And so it starts with a story, and there's really a storyline that goes with every unit where students are the main characters, and they're solving some big challenge, which happens to be a real world environmental problem. And so in every unit of Green Ninja, we have students tackle a relevant environmental issue, and they're going to use science and engineering to do that. So that's the lens. This provides an important context for learning. And when this is done right, we find that student engagement and academic ability, they both go up. So Matt, do you want to tell us about the kind of connections between this type of approach and especially now that we're doing all our learning at home? What does this mean?
Yeah, I have this question at the top here, and something that we've been hearing about. Do these stay-at-home orders mean that we need to leave NGSS locked away in our classroom? So if you can hit the little button there, and Eugene, we can have our little NGSS logo stuck in our classroom all by itself. And that is definitely not the vision that any of us have. Although we understand the challenges that teachers are going through, we want to remind us, remember that idea that people seem to latch onto, that being local and being relevant to students' lives, that doesn't change. The world around them maybe looks a little bit different than it did a couple of weeks ago, but there are a lot of connections that we can make to people's lives and to their home, where all of a sudden we actually, we talk about homeschool connections and how important those are in parent involvement, and we all of a sudden actually have this amazing pipeline to bring science into the home in a way that we haven't before. We're definitely concerned that the easiest thing to do is for ideas to our students, give them videos to watch, have them do readings where they're just getting information passed to them in a one-dimensional way. But we really feel like this opportunity of being homebound gives us a chance to focus in on those practices and those cross-cutting concepts. And we want to make sure that we present to you today a vision for how that can happen in your home environment as you're trying to help your students learning at home.
Great. So let's get started. So we're gonna walk you through a couple of these culminating projects. And this is our favorite one. This is called scientific storytelling. And we've actually done a lot of research on this through NSF. And the idea is that students are going to tell their own stories about the science that they've been learning. And this is what this unit looks like. I'm just going to go over it real briefly. Matt's going to deconstruct a little bit of the standards. But this is standards-based materials, 6.1.62. Those are lesson 6.1 to 6.2. And we're going to look at sensory response and how the body reacts to different types of stimuli. And then we're going to go into providing students with some background understanding about how to tell a good story and how to create a film. And the culminating project is that students actually create their own film. And they share that with the world. Now, I have some teachers today who were asking me, hey, Eugene, how are we going to do this? Because our students can't get together and create films. And so I just grabbed some examples from last year's film. So we do a Green Ninja Film Festival every year, and students can submit their films. So these are just from our YouTube channel, and you'll be able to see any of these. They're all available, where students use different techniques to do their storytelling, their scientific storytelling. So this is one where students used a tool that have them drawing really, really quickly to display some visual images with voice on top of it. Here's another one where students used some animation together with just drawing images and again, voiceover and music on top. Here's some students using Legos. And so you could imagine that you could have, this was a student project, you could have the students, one student do one scene, another student do another scene, then bring it together to put the film together. So we can envision that students could continue to work in teams to create engaging stories. And we provide various tools that you'll have access to. For example, how to tell a good story. And we use something called the story spine, which is a basic framework for creating a story once upon a time, and then every day. But then one day something changes, and because of that, until finally you have the kind of end of the story. and ever since then. So this is the story spine, and we teach this, so we can provide you materials for helping your students tell a good story, which is actually the key piece in this, is creating a good story. How you manifest the story, whether you use stop motion or even you have them graphic novel, is totally fine. We also teach about filmmaking techniques, and this is called shot blocking: foreground, middle ground, and a background, close up, extreme close up, over the shoulder shots and profile shots. These are all useful ideas for students to have, no matter what kind of way they manifest their film: drawing, filmmaking, animation. They all use the same ideas of visual storytelling. So this is our project on storytelling. And we also have something called the Green Ninja Film Festival, which is happening for the 7th year. This year, it'll be online for social reasons. But your students can still participate. Anyone can participate in the Green Ninja Film Festival. It's a way to recognize student achievements. And we think it's a great way to sum up any kind of science investigation that students are doing, especially if it has an environmental focus around solving some type of local or relevant environmental problem. So Matt, what did you think about this unit, thinking from your NGSS lens?
Yeah, first of all, I'm calling you now from my phone audio, hoping that the audio will be clearer. So we'll see how it works. So this is a unit that actually, this idea of storytelling is not just sort of some abstract pie in the sky thing. We've got our storytelling here very much integrated with some of the other standards that are happening, including these life science standards. So here I put a performance expectation from middle school life science about how students need to gather and synthesize information that sensory receptors respond to stimuli by sending messages to the brain for immediate behavior and storage as memories. And what we're really looking at here is imagine that you've got this statement, your friend is sick with a virus. Well, what goes through in the student's head is first they have to capture that sound energy, and then that gets converted into something that their brain sees as language, and parsing the language, your friend is sick, and each of those words, and they're thinking about what are those concepts, what's a friend, and what does sick mean? And then they're going to be tying into their memory and all the different things that they remember about their friends and what it means to play with them, and then the things that they know about sickness and coronavirus. And then in the end of all that, there's a reaction. I feel scared. And this idea of connecting from the inputs that we present to people, the stories that we tell them, and what happens in their brain is integrated throughout this storytelling unit along the way. It's not just trying to tell a story about climate. We're not just trying to tell a story to change the world, but we're also really trying to help the students along with this life science aspect of things. So Eugene, I don't know if you're there. My audio is maybe going, but my video disappeared for a moment.
Well, your audio is just fine, Matt. So I've just moved on to the next slide there about connections to NGSS. I think you're muted at the moment, Matt.
Got it. Thank you. So the idea here is that our students are doing these practices, the science and engineering practices. And I wanted to draw attention to one of these science and engineering practices in particular, this communicate to an audience. Now, many of you know the NGSS, and you know that we have this constructing an explanation. Well, in order to construct an explanation, you usually need to write it down or talk about it to a person. So why is there an extra practice about communicating? And that's something that we want to hit on very clearly, because that is our job as scientists, is we need to be sharing our science with people. If we're just creating science and explaining things just for ourselves, that's not good enough. We need to be communicating, and we need to be communicating to specific audiences. And that's why there is a communications practice. And part of that is targeting a very specific audience. And so we wanted to draw attention to actually doing that. Go ahead, Eugene, to the next one. And to emphasize that, we have these 3 dimensions in NGSS. So we need to be helping our students sort of see what it means to do each of those 3 dimensions well. And so we've created 3-dimensional rubrics for these projects that tie into all three of the dimensions. So in this particular case, this culminating activity is actually, really it's the culmination to an entire year of instruction. So this one has a 2-page rubric here with many criteria. So I pulled out some of the kind of the key elements of that from each of the three dimensions. Our first dimension at the top here is about communicating. And look at what we're evaluating our students on is whether they can really make strong connections to the culture, language, and traditions of their audience. And that's that specific audience that they need to be talking to. So we want to be having our students do that. Of course, they need to be doing some core idea science, and we need to accurately depict that science. And so there's some aspects of that. And then lastly, we really want to be thinking about cause and effect relationships and talking about how humans are influencing things. That's one of California's environmental principles and concepts, is that the humans are having an effect on things. It's also integral to the Earth and space science standards within NGSS. So we have rubric criteria on each of those and within each of these three dimensions here. And if you hit our button, I think it should pop up maybe with a little arrow emphasizing that because these three dimensions are working in tandem, it's kind of hard to tell apart where climate science ends and cause and effect begins. Those things are working in parallel, and so we have to be mindful of that when we're thinking about scoring three-dimensional rubrics, that some of these dimensions cross over in beautiful ways, which is exactly what we want them to do. So let's talk about another project. That was a pretty big one, and you might be thinking, oh gosh, I don't know how if I can help manage my students through doing video at home when they're working in teams and collaboration, and maybe my students aren't quite ready for something that's that big. But storytelling can take many different forms, and so we wanted to show you a different unit within Green Ninja, that how we've made storytelling manifest itself here. And this is also a weather and climate unit. And the challenge here is our students are going to create a story warning friends and family about a possible future weather or climate extreme. So let's go ahead and hit our button here and tell you a little bit about this unit in a nutshell. Here, our students are going to adopt a city, or actually 3 cities in general, and they're going to adopt the city and monitor its weather and throughout the whole unit. And then during the course of the unit, they're going to spend about 20+ lessons investigating factors that influence weather and climate. Now, we have great hands-on activities and things like that we designed Green Ninja around, but as we are all homebound, we're sticking to, of course, more of these online interactive tutorials, some readings, some videos, whatever it is that we can cobble together to make this experience work for our students, so that they have a good sense of what are the factors that influence climate. So that's the background. So what is the culminating activity where they're going to be telling a story? Well, we have our final series of lessons here. You can hit the button, Eugene. We challenge our students to write a fictional story warning their friends from another city about a possible weather or climate extreme. We call this cli-fi as a genre, climate fiction. And this is something that students can work on individually. We can support them maybe through Google Docs writing tools, but it doesn't have to be that way. It can be done with very low technology needs. And so we want them to be able to express themselves in stories no matter what technology we have available. So let's go ahead and take a look here at the example here of there was a Labrador dog named Simon. Simon lived on the streets of San Francisco. He learned to fend for himself and find food from strangers. And here we're going to start tying into some actual knowledge about San Francisco. San Francisco is typically cold and foggy, but that's been changing. The normally cool afternoons, now we're getting to more specific information about the weather and climate there, has turned quite hot. And Simon's now always able to find enough water, and you can see the story can go on from here about our dog and what happens to him. There's going to be an adventure, I can promise you. And these are relatively short stories, but the idea is to give our students a chance to tell these stories. So Eugene, tell us about another type of experience we can have.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that what we want to emphasize is that even in these two examples of projects, both of them have a creative element to them, making a film or writing a story, but they're based in science. And in both cases, students have to justify that they understand the science through either in the filmmaking, a digital portfolio, or in the storytelling, again, they have to provide some scientific information like graphs and charts to justify their story. So, so that's why this belongs, firmly in a science classroom. And this image right here just is the roadmap image that we provide of the unit, where students are exploring weather and climate information. And then at the end, they get to use that weather and climate information to tell a story. And so we kind of marrying these two things of it has to be justified and evidence-based and data, but then they can be creative and tell a seemingly fictional story, but that is based in accurate science. The last one we're just going to go through in the last couple minutes is a kind of change of tack, and this is around food. And the challenge for this project is to reduce the carbon footprint of food. And students are actually going to create a classroom cookbook of low carbon recipes. But one of the themes, and again, going back to this idea of NGSS, is one of the strong themes is about this integrated approach about resources and thinking about energy and mass. Where does the apple get its energy? And then where does this cookie, how does it get created? And there's really strong tie-ins. And I think Matt's going to tell us a little bit about how he sees this culminating project and kind of how it blends in with NGSS.
Yeah, so first of all, can you hear me, Eugene?
Yep, sounds good.
Okay. So with the NGSS here, remember we have our 3 dimensions. We have our practices, our core ideas, and our cross-cutting concepts. And so when we're thinking about this culminating activity of our students are actually going to create a cookbook. And that cookbook, you can think of this actually as an engineering design challenge where we have certain criteria. We're trying to reduce our carbon footprint. We're trying to increase our health access. And those two things working together are criteria. And we have a bunch of constraints as well. We have these constraints from if you're working from home right now, what do you have in your kitchen? What's available at the grocery store? And so this is really a fun engineering challenge. But in the process of doing this, we're of course understanding better about resources and what resources go into growing our food. And we're also understanding a little bit more about We're also understanding a little bit more about our body system and health and how that all works together. And of course, all of this is related to how do we get our energy from our food? Where does our food get its energy from that it's storing in there? And really thinking of this in terms of cross-cutting concepts of energy and matter.
Well, Matt, we're almost out of time, so I do want to just jump forward and just in the last minute. We wanted to provide all our guests today with access to any of these materials. So if you go to greenninja.org and you sign up as a guest and you mention Science is Cool Conference in the little box there that says, how did you hear about Green Ninja? Then we'll get you everything you need, an account to our program, provide you with links or access to do any of these projects. We think it's a great way, especially in the situation we're in today. We also have just a general resource page that you can go visit right now. If you go to greenninja.org, you'll see at the very top, you'll see a little banner. And we have some different lesson sequences, some tips about teaching from home. And then at the bottom here, we have the Green Ninja videos if you want to watch a Dr. Burrito episode. And if you want some questions to go along with that and provide them for your students, that's there. The Green Ninja Film Festival is happening. And then so, if you think, oh, maybe that could work with my students this year, give that a chance. And then also Matt and I have our own podcast, which is called Ask Matt. And, Matt is a science education expert. And so we just think of all these NGSS science ed questions and we share them. And we have an episode come out every few weeks. And so you're invited to check out that. So I think this is a good place to stop. We're happy to do some Q&A if there's some questions, and look forward to hearing back from Dave.
Hey, Eugene, how you doing? You need to stop sharing your screen. Thank you very much. That was great. That was really, really fun. As soon as you said you were Dr. Burrito, all you got were silly questions.
Hey, we got to have fun while we're doing this, right, Dave?
There is one serious question. What are your plans for high school?
Gosh, high school is a tough thing. We don't have direct plans right now, but Matt has been doing some interesting work in high schools. Matt, do you want to say some of the stuff you've been doing with high schools right now?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure how much our people in the audience are familiar with California and what we've done with California, where we've really taken earth and space science and we've weaved it through the biology, the chemistry, and the physics. And really, there's a lot of opportunities for taking our earth science environmental phenomena and studying those in the other disciplines. So there's a big need for it. We haven't quite got it there yet, but it's a big undertaking.
I think people would love to see that. So I just have to get this one question. So somebody posted on Twitter, there is really a carbon footprint for burritos. Is that true?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a carbon footprint for everything. So even this conference that we're having here, I would imagine is probably like a 50th of the conference carbon footprint of going to NSTA this year. So. But food also can have a footprint of the energy required to make the different foods and the different ingredients. And if you want to know what Dr. Burrito discovered in his endeavor, was that veggie burritos have like 5 to 10 times a smaller carbon footprint than a beef or pork burrito. So if you are going to Chipotle today, and you want to do something good for the environment as well, then choosing vegetarian tends to have a much smaller carbon emissions.
That's right. I would have never thought of that. Who would think of that? That's a great fact.
Well, Dr. Burrito thinks about that kind of stuff. So Dave, next time we go get a burrito, we can chat about that more too.
So, important question for everybody. Best burrito in Northern California?
Well, that is something I know something about. Some of you, when the election seemed to matter a few weeks ago, and we were looking at the 538 from Nate Silver, they did a thing where they were looking for the best burrito in the country. El Faroito in 24th and Mission in San Francisco was the top ranked one. I like El Faroito, but being a San Jose person, La Victoria breakfast burrito with orange sauce. It's hard to do much better than that. So if you haven't been to San Jose, if you do get to go to San Jose, go to La Vic and make sure you get the orange sauce. It's a regular burrito, but the sauce has some magic to it. And Dave, you've had a few of those yourself, right?
I love them. I'll tell you what, let's go for one next week.
Okay, we'll social distance, but we'll eat it at the same time.
Oh, geez, forget it, we can't. We'll have a virtual burrito. They might be doing takeout. I do have a climate question for you, since you're a climate scientist. So I've seen a lot of posting of air quality improving because of the less air travel, less cars. Are there any San Jose resources like local Bay Area? I haven't seen much in the Bay Area actually. I've seen it mostly in other cities, but definitely that's a big effect, right?
Well, we're definitely seeing it, and especially in populated cities, we see the air quality improving. Some of our students at San Jose State are actually going to use the purple air weather stations that people use to see if we see the actual improvement. But it's been well documented from satellite imagery, for example, in places in China. I'll be curious to see if we see the same thing in India. And in fact, I imagine that if we use some of the satellite data, we could see how well countries are doing with their social distancing by looking at air quality data. So I think, though, that the interesting story in this is that we have made this amazing change in our behavior over like just a few days. And we're doing it for a purpose, and that purpose is our personal health and our community's health. Could we make similar kind of behavior changes for the health of our planet? And maybe that's one piece of silver lining in this, is that once we get through this and we figure out that as a community we can work together to improve our community health, we might hopefully take some similar actions for the health of our planet.
Yeah, I hope some of the things we're doing now stick, that they're pretty sensible, right?
Yeah. So, well, I mean, it's hard for us. We don't want to live inside like this for the rest of our lives, but maybe we can see how when we work together toward a common goal and mission, that we can actually make progress together.
Well, maybe we've learned not every meeting has to happen face to face. Some do, but some don't.
That's right. I think one of the things as a climate scientist, I know Matt and I have talked about this quite a bit, is that we do fly around to conferences, and I know that at least myself, I've reduced the amount of conferences that I go to because of the environmental impact. But these tools are getting better, and here's another way for us to continue to interact in meaningful ways, but having lower carbon emissions.
Matt and Gina, actually, I'm glad I kept you on. There's a comment I overlooked. Does Green Ninja have Spanish resources?
Oh, great question. Yes. So all of our student-facing materials come both in English and Spanish, and we have a teacher companion. We have student guides. We have printed materials as well as online materials. But even on the online side, there's just a little toggle switch, and you can flip back and forth between English and Spanish because we work a lot, mostly in California, and we like to work in underserved communities, traditionally underserved in STEM. Having our materials in both languages is really helpful for that.
Great. Yeah, just so everybody listening knows, we had 2,500 people register. About a third of them are international. And I see there's a few people who say they're from Mexico, say they love their burritos too. So that may be where the Spanish language question came from, maybe from locally as you know too. So. Can
I tell you something, Dave, though? I have family in Mexico City, when you go to Mexico City, you're not going to find a burrito there. There's basically almost no burritos. Like, it's kind of a northern Mexico thing. The food is wonderful. I'm not going to say it, but burritos, that's more a thing from the north and from this country.
Okay, that's good to know. Great. Oh, and just another one popped up. Do you have materials for elementary grades?
So we don't. We're a 6-8 program right now. What we do have for elementary is the Green Ninja videos. So if you go to our website and you go to the Green Ninja Show tab, you'll see like the 50+ videos. Some are animated, some are live action. They're all kind of silly, quirky. And then there's a teacher guide that comes with them with some questions. So you could take one of the Green Ninja videos and you could assign some of those questions to your students and pretty quickly turn that into some kind of learning experience. Now, to go to the next level, like Matt was always encouraging us to get, not just pushing information, but get students to start to think on their own. You can do that with these videos as well. We try to provide you with questions along how to do that, but then to design a whole lesson will take a little bit more work. The good news is that once we kind of get through this middle school piece, our next area is elementary for sure, and that's going to K5 program, but we don't have that right yet.